From Davos Forum to trade war, Switzerland speaks out, shaking the world. Switzerland, a nation synonymous with serenity, neutrality, and breathtaking alpine vistas, has long stood as a beacon of stability in a world often torn by conflict. For more than 5 centuries, since its last military engagement in 1815, this small European country has avoided the tumult of war, cultivating instead a reputation for diplomacy, economic resilience, and an unwavering commitment to peace. With a GDP approaching $800 billion in 2024 and unemployment rate hovering below 3%, Switzerland thrives as a global financial powerhouse, hosting institutions like the World Central Bank and serving as a hub for international organizations. Yet, in early 2025, this tranquil nation found itself at the center of an unexpected controversy, openly criticizing a figure who commands one of the world's most powerful nations, Donald Trump, the President of the United States. What prompted this rare departure from Switzerland's tradition of silence on international political matters? The answer lies in a series of events that unfolded at the World Economic Forum in Davos, a prestigious annual gathering of global leaders, where Trump's provocative actions ignited a firestorm of debate, drawing Switzerland into an uncharacteristic spotlight. The incident that sparked this clash occurred when Trump, during his address at Davos, proposed steep tariffs on European nations, long-standing allies of the United States, accusing them of exploiting American markets for decades. His rhetoric was sharp, his tone unapologetic, and his policy suggestions disruptive, aimed at reshaping trade relationships to favor the U.S. For a country like Switzerland, which prides itself on maintaining balanced and fair economic ties, this move was more than a mere policy disagreement. It was an affront to the principles of cooperation and mutual respect that underpin its global standing. Switzerland, though not a member of the European Union, relies heavily on stable trade with its European neighbors and the broader international community. Trump's call for tariffs threatened to destabilize this delicate equilibrium, prompting a response that few could have anticipated from a nation so dedicated to avoiding confrontation. Swiss officials, typically reserved in their public statements, issued a pointed rebuke, accusing Trump of undermining decades of trust and collaboration. This was not just a diplomatic spat. It was a signal that even the most neutral of nations could be pushed to a breaking point when their core values were challenged. To understand why Switzerland reacted so strongly, one must look beyond the surface of this single event and delve into the country's identity. For over 500 years, Switzerland has cultivated a doctrine of neutrality, not merely as a geopolitical strategy, but as a way of life. This stance has allowed it to weather the storms of history through Napoleonic wars, two world conflicts, and the Cold War, emerging unscathed while others faltered. Its economy, bolstered by a robust financial sector and precision industries like watchmaking and pharmaceuticals, reflects this stability. In 2024 alone, Switzerland's exports reached record highs, with luxury goods and banking services driving growth. Yet, this prosperity depends on a world order that values open markets and predictable relationships, precisely what Trump's tariff threats jeopardized. At Davos, his words were not just an attack on Europe, they were a challenge to the very system that has enabled Switzerland to thrive. The Swiss response, then, was less about Trump himself and more about safeguarding a legacy built on centuries of careful navigation through global turbulence. The Swiss people, too, played a role in amplifying this moment. In the city of Basel, the annual carnival, a vibrant festival known for its elaborate masks, colorful parades, and satirical commentary, took on an unexpected edge in 2025. Typically a celebration of local culture, this year's event saw participants subtly weave critiques of Trump's leadership into their displays. Papier-mâché caricatures of a brash, tariff-wielding figure marched alongside traditional floats, while confetti rained down as a playful yet poignant symbol of dissent. This was not a riot or a protest in the conventional sense. Such displays are rare in Switzerland, where public unrest is virtually unheard of, but a creative expression of unease. The Swiss, known for their restraint, found in the carnival a way to voice their discomfort with the leadership style they saw as reckless, authoritarian, and antithetical to their values of fairness and dialogue. It was a reminder that even in a nation of peacekeepers, there are limits to tolerance when principles are at stake. This reaction was not born in isolation. Trump's policies in 2025 had already begun to ripple across the globe, stirring discontent far beyond Switzerland's borders. His decision to double tariffs on Canadian aluminum and steel, announced shortly after Davos, escalated tensions with one of America's closest allies, threatening a trade war that could plunge both nations into economic turmoil. The move, which raised tariffs from 25% to 50%, came on the heels of Ontario's retaliatory 25% tariff on electricity exports to the U.S., a tit-for-tat escalation that sent shockwaves through financial markets. Within 48 hours, the Dow Jones plummeted by over 600 points, a stark indicator of investor panic. Financial analysts at Goldman Sachs revised their U.S. recession forecast to 20%, up from 15%, while Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell scrambled to reassure the public that the economy remained sound, a claim the markets clearly did not buy. Trump's subsequent threat to impose tariffs on Canadian auto imports further inflamed the situation, risking a crisis for manufacturers like GM, Ford, and Stellantis, whose supply chains straddle the U.S.-Canada border. For Switzerland, watching from afar, these developments underscored the broader danger of Trump's approach, a willingness to upend alliances and economic stability for short-term political gain. Canada, unlike Switzerland, did not hesitate to push back with force. Premier Doug Ford condemned Trump's tariffs as an unjustified attack on Canada's economy, warning of absolute disaster for both nations' unemployment, factory closures, and runaway inflation. Canada's Ministry of Trade swiftly outlined countermeasures, including potential tariffs on U.S. goods like food, automotive parts, and agricultural products, which could cost American industries billions. More alarmingly, whispers emerged of a possible restriction on oil and gas exports to the U.S., a move that could send American fuel prices soaring by 20-30% within months. Canada supplies over 4 million barrels of crude oil daily to U.S. refineries, a lifeline for states like Texas and Illinois, where facilities are tailored to process. Canada's heavy crude, natural gas from Canada, heats homes across the northern U.S., while minerals like lithium and cobalt fuel America's tech sector. If Canada were to pivot these resources to buyers like China or the EU, the U.S. could face not just an economic hit, but a strategic loss of influence in North America. Switzerland, with its keen eye on global stability, saw in this escalating conflict a microcosm of the chaos. Trump's policies could unleash worldwide the U.S.-Canada trade war, set to intensify in March 2025, with a 25% tariff on a wide range of Canadian imports, marks a turning point. Canada's retaliatory plan, $155 billion in counter tariffs targeting U.S. agriculture, consumer goods, and raw materials, promises to drive up prices and disrupt supply chains on both sides of the border. The Keystone XL pipeline, once abandoned amid environmental protests, has reemerged as a flashpoint, with Trump now championing its revival to secure Canadian oil amid rising energy demands. Critics argue that the pipeline's environmental risks, oil spills threatening aquifers, high greenhouse gas emissions from tar sands, outweigh its benefits, while supporters see it as a lifeline for U.S. energy security. Yet, even if revived, Keystone XL alone cannot offset the damage of a full-blown trade war. Ontario's threat to cut electricity exports, which power 10% of the U.S. grid, adds another layer of peril. A 20% spike in U.S. electricity prices could cripple businesses, strain households, and trigger blackouts in cities like New York and Detroit, already grappling with an overstretched power grid battered by recent storms. For Switzerland, this unfolding drama is a cautionary tale of how quickly economic interdependence can unravel under aggressive leadership. Trump's domestic rhetoric only fueled the fire. In a chaotic White House press conference in early 2025, he doubled down on his tariff stance while veering into unexpected territory, questioning NATO's reliability and hinting at a potential U.S. withdrawal. "If they don't pay, I'm not going to defend them," he declared, challenging the alliance's core tenet of collective defense, a principle invoked after 9/11s to support the U.S. This was no idle threat. It was a calculated jab at European allies already wary of his trade policies. Switzerland, though not a NATO member, relies on the stability of the transatlantic partnership for its own security and economic interests. Trump's words sent a chill through European capitals, raising fears of a fractured West at a time when unity is sorely needed. His simultaneous reversal of some tariffs on Canada and Mexico, framed as a temporary concession to curb immigration and fentanyl smuggling, only added to the confusion, leaving businesses in a state of limbo. Was this a strategic pivot or a sign of indecision? For Switzerland, it reinforced the perception of a leader whose unpredictability posed a threat to global order. Beyond trade and alliances, Trump's leadership style itself became a lightning rod. The Swiss, in their carnival satire and official statements, expressed a disdain that surpassed their historical critiques of figures like Napoleon or Hitler. To them, Trump embodied a brash, unilateral approach that clashed with their ethos of consensus and respect for sovereignty. His press conference antics, signing a proclamation for Women's History Month while facing past accusations of misconduct, announcing Elon Musk, led federal layoffs affecting veterans and infrastructure, only deepened this divide. Switzerland's reaction was not just about tariffs. It was a rejection of a worldview that prized confrontation over cooperation. This sentiment echoed in other corners of the globe. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, after years of vowing to fight Russia to victory, stunned the world in 2025 by calling for peace talks following a meeting with Trump. With Ukraine's economy crumbling, GDP shrinking, Western aid dwindling, and public morale fading, Zelensky's pivot reflected a pragmatic shift, one perhaps influenced by Trump's insistence on reducing U.S. support. For Switzerland, this was yet another sign of a world in flux, where even the staunchest resolve could bend under economic and political pressure. As these events unfolded, the broader implications for smaller nations like Switzerland came into focus. Historically, Switzerland's neutrality has been a shield, allowing it to mediate conflicts and host peace talks from the Geneva Conventions to modern day diplomacy. But in a world increasingly polarized by trade wars, energy crises, and superpower rivalries, can such a stance endure? The Swiss response to Trump suggests a willingness to adapt, to speak out when silence no longer suffices. Other nations may follow suit. Iceland, for instance, recently criticized U.S. fishing quotas in the Atlantic, while New Zealand voiced concerns over American tech monopolies. These smaller states, often overshadowed by giants like the US, China, and Russia, are finding their voices, driven by a need to protect their interests in a shifting landscape. For Switzerland, this evolution is not a rejection of neutrality, but a redefinition of it, an acknowledgement that passivity is not the same as peace. The economic stakes are staggering. If the US-Canada trade war persists, Canada's GDP could shrink by 1.2%, with export sectors like agriculture and energy bearing the brunt. US consumers might face $500 to $1,000 in added annual costs as prices for food, fuel, and goods climb. Inflation, already a specter in the US, could surge, eroding purchasing power and threatening jobs in manufacturing and construction. Foreign investors, jittery over North American stability, might redirect capital to Asia or Europe, weakening both economies further. China and the EU, eager to capitalize, could swoop in to secure Canada's resources, altering the balance of power in the region. Switzerland, with its financial acumen, is already diversifying its investments, eyeing opportunities in emerging markets like Southeast Asia to hedge against Western volatility. This adaptability underscores a key lesson. In a world of giants, agility can be as powerful as might. Yet, amid the chaos, there lies opportunity. The trade wars fallout could force nations to rethink reliance on single partners, fostering new alliances and supply chains. Switzerland, with its history of innovation, could lead the charge, perhaps brokering a coalition of neutral states to stabilize trade or pioneering sustainable energy solutions to offset fossil fuel disputes. The USA and Canada, too, might find common ground in necessity, reviving projects like Keystone XL not as a cure-all, but as a step toward reconciliation. Trump's policies, for all their disruption, have exposed vulnerabilities in the global system overdependence on a few key players, fragility in energy networks, the limits of unilateralism. Whether this leads to collapse or renewal depends on the choices made in the coming months. For Switzerland, the path is clear: uphold its principles, adapt to the moment, and remind the world that even the smallest voices can resonate when the stakes are high. As March 18, 2025 dawns, the world watches a drama unfold that is as much about economics as it is about identity. Switzerland's clash with Trump, Canada's defiance, and the tremors in NATO and Ukraine signal a new era, one where old certainties are fading and new alignments are taking shape. The Swiss, with their quiet strength, have shown that neutrality need not mean weakness, just as Canada's resistance proves that proximity does not guarantee submission. Trump, for his part, remains a catalyst, his actions a mirror reflecting the tensions of a fractured globe. Whether this moment heralds a descent into isolationism or a reawakening of cooperation, one thing is certain: the world of 2025 is not the world of yesterday, and nations great and small must navigate it with eyes wide open.